A woman with 3 kids was denied a room at every motel in the city, every single one. That same evening, the man who ran the last place that turned her away was closing up his office when his wife called him from the highway. She'd seen something on the shoulder of the road, just past the Irving station at the edge of town. Not a broken-down car, not a deer, not what he expected at all. It was the woman his receptionist had turned away that afternoon. And her 3 children sitting on a guardrail in the November dark, waiting for a bus that had stopped running 2 hours ago. What happened next would cost him more than he thought he could afford, and give him back something he didn't know he'd lost. Noreen Galloway was 41 years old, and she had the posture of someone who had been carrying things a long time without setting them down. Not fragile, not broken. Just shaped by weight the way a beam gets shaped by decades of holding up a roof. You could see it in the way she stood, always slightly forward, always slightly ready, like the ground beneath her might shift without warning. For 6 years she had held things together on her own. 3 kids, 1 income, no one to call at midnight when the furnace quit or the car wouldn't start. She worked as a dietary aide at Miramichi Regional Hospital in New Brunswick. Not the kind of job anyone brags about at dinner parties, but the kind that kept the electricity on and the pantry stocked and the library fines paid before they turned into something worse. She knew every shift supervisor by name. She had never called in sick without having someone lined up to cover. She had not taken a vacation day in 4 years because vacation days, when you were doing the math she was always doing, were worth more as backup than as rest. Her husband, Warren, had left when their youngest, Cody, was 8 months old. He didn't leave angry. That was the thing that had stayed with Noreen the longest. He left quiet. He left in the middle of a Thursday afternoon while she was at work, and the kids were at her mother's. He left a note on the kitchen counter that said he was sorry and that he needed something different, and that she deserved better. She had read that note 11 times in the first hour. Then she folded it, put it in the drawer under the junk mail and the old takeout menus, and never looked at it again. She couldn't afford to be angry. She couldn't afford to grieve. She had a baby who needed formula, and a 4-year-old named Lily, who had started wetting the bed again, and a 7-year-old named Marcus, who had stopped talking at school because his teacher had called Noreen twice to ask if everything was okay at home, and the answer was no, but she couldn't say that. So she said everything was fine, and she kept moving. Marcus was 13 now. He had his father's jawline and his mother's eyes, and a habit of noticing things other people missed. He noticed when the milk was running low before Noreen did. He noticed when Cody was about to cry before Cody knew it himself. He noticed when his mother hadn't eaten since the morning, even when she insisted she wasn't hungry, because he had watched her do the calculation in real time. 1 sandwich split 3 ways, half a portion for herself, saved for later, later never coming. He never said anything about it. He just made sure there was something left for her. A piece of bread with peanut butter set on the counter near the coffee maker where she'd find it, a banana beside her keys. Small offerings left without ceremony, without expectation, without needing to be thanked. He was 13 years old, and he had learned to love the way adults forget to, practically and quietly and without making a fuss. Lily was 10. She had her mother's stubbornness and a laugh that came from somewhere deep and surprised you every time you heard it. She carried a paperback everywhere she went, not always the same one, but always one. At the shelter in Fredericton, she'd read the same 3 chapters of a library book about horses so many times the spine had softened to cloth. She didn't complain. She adapted. She adapted the way kids adapt when they have no other option, so completely that you might mistake it for ease. Cody was 6. He still thought the world was mostly good, because Noreen had worked very hard to make sure of it. He called French fries happy sticks because she had once, in a moment of tired joy at a truck stop outside Moncton, called them that, and it had stuck. He collected smooth rocks. Not for any reason he could explain. He just liked the way they felt in his hand, solid and cool, like something the world had taken its time making. He had 7 of them in his jacket pocket on the night they sat on that guardrail. The reason they were sitting on that guardrail, in the November dark, outside a town called Blackville, started the way most of Noreen's worst days started. Not with a catastrophe, with an accumulation. The building where they'd rented for 3 years had been sold in September. The new owner, a numbered company with an address in Halifax, had sent a notice in October. Renovations. Vacant possession required. 60 days. All units. Noreen had read the letter twice at the kitchen table while Marcus did homework beside her, and Lily ate crackers on the couch, and Cody slept in the small room off the hall, where she'd painted the walls, blue herself using a roller borrowed from her neighbor, and a can of paint from the Habitat Restore. She read the letter, folded it, put it in the folder she kept under the bed with the utility bills and the kids' health cards, and started supper. She didn't panic. Not then. Panic was a thing you did when you had someone to panic with. For 7 weeks she searched. Every listing on Kijiji, every Facebook group for Miramichi Rentals, the bulletin board at the Ultramar, the one at the Sobeys. She called numbers scrawled on index cards. She filled out applications on her phone during breaks at work, fingers moving fast over the cracked screen she'd been meaning to replace for 8 months but hadn't. Every application required the same information. Name, employment, income, number of dependents. 3. That number every single time landed like a door starting to close before she'd finished speaking. The first landlord was polite. He had a 2-bedroom on Henry Street with a gas fireplace and a yard. He looked at her application and said his insurance situation had changed and he was only really looking for professionals at the moment. She thanked him and left. The second one didn't bother with an excuse. He looked at Cody sitting on her hip, looked at Lily beside her holding her book, looked at Marcus standing in the parking lot because there wasn't room in the small hallway for all of them. And he said the place had just gone to someone else. She said that was too bad. She walked back to the car and sat in the driver's seat for 2 minutes before she started the engine. The third one was a woman in her 70s who had a small duplex near the river. She had been kind on the phone, asked good questions, said she liked the sound of Noreen's work history. Then Noreen arrived, and the woman looked at the 3 children and said she just wasn't sure the space was right for a family of that size. "You understand," she said. Noreen understood. She had been understanding for 6 years. The fourth one was the one that hurt the most, the way the fourth always hurts the most, because by then you've started to believe there might be a pattern. Raymond Uele was 54 years old. He owned a small cluster of rental properties just outside town, the kind of places where the appliances were dated but functional, and the rent was fair, and the landlord fixed things himself instead of calling someone. He had talked to Noreen on the phone for 12 minutes. She had been honest with him. Her income, her rental history, her situation. 3 kids, all in school, quiet. She kept a clean house, never missed a payment in 9 years of renting, not once. He had said, "Come by on Saturday." He had said, it sounded like it could work. He had said the words in a way that made her replay them before she fell asleep. She pressed Cody's jacket that Friday night. She braided Lily's hair carefully. She told Marcus to wear the dark green sweater, the one that made him look older. She wanted them to look like what they were, a family, not a liability. Raymond opened the front door on Saturday morning. He was a broad-shouldered man, gray at the temples, the kind of hands that had been useful his whole life. His face was open. Then he looked past Noreen and counted. Something behind his eyes shifted, not cruel, more like a shutter coming down on a window. "I didn't realize it was this many," he said. "Mr. Willett," Noreen said. "They're good kids. Marcus is on the honor roll. Lily's never made a noise anyone's complained about. Cody's 6. He collects rocks. They're not going to be a problem." Raymond looked at his porch railing, looked at the middle distance, looked at everything except the 3 children standing in a line behind their mother in their best clothes, waiting for another door to close. "There's liability to consider," he said. "Young kids, that's wear and tear. I've been burned before. You understand." There it was. You understand, as though understanding made any of it easier. "Thank you for your time," Noreen said. She turned, reached back, took Cody's hand. Marcus had already started walking. Lily tucked her book under her arm and followed. They went down the steps and along the front walk, and Noreen's back was straight the whole way. Her chin was level. Her eyes were dry. Raymond stood on his porch and watched them go, and something moved in his chest that he told himself was relief. He went inside and closed the door. That evening, with $60 in her account and checkout at her sister's couch coming at the end of the week, Noreen drove toward Blackville because someone in a Facebook group had mentioned a rental there. The rental turned out to be a hunting camp without insulation that the owner was describing as a rustic retreat. She looked at it for 3 minutes and got back in the car. The car died 12 kilometers outside of town. Not a dramatic death, a quiet one. A sound like something releasing, a shudder, and then nothing. She coasted to the shoulder and sat there for a moment with the engine off and the hazard lights going orange in the dark. She called her roadside assistance. Wait time was 3 to 4 hours. She called her sister. Voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She called a third time and her sister picked up, apologetic, tired, said her own situation had shifted. She was really sorry. Noreen said it was fine. She always said it was fine. She looked at her phone. 11% battery. The temperature outside was 4 degrees. In November in New Brunswick, 4 degrees at 6 in the evening becomes 0 by 9. She turned the hazard lights off to save what was left of the battery. She got the kids out of the car, because sitting inside a car on the highway shoulder at night with no lights was more dangerous than standing beside it. She stood at the guardrail with them. Marcus stood beside her. Lily read by the light of her phone. Cody held his rocks. That was where Pauline Wett found them. Pauline was 50 years old. She had been a social worker for 19 years before her knees and her back, and a particular caseload in 2019 had combined to tell her with unusual clarity that she needed to stop. She had been Raymond's wife for 23 years, a marriage built on steadiness. They didn't fight loudly or often. They disagreed about the thermostat and the dog and whether the driveway needed resurfacing. They had raised 2 children who were now grown and gone, a son in Calgary and a daughter in Halifax, and the house on the county road was quiet in the specific way houses get quiet when the people who filled them have left. She was driving home from her book club in Doketown when her headlights swept across something on the shoulder just past the Irving. She slowed without deciding to, pulled over without choosing, cut the engine, and sat there for a moment. Then she got out. The cold hit her across the face. She walked toward the guardrail. 10 feet away she could see them clearly. A woman, 3 children. The smallest one was clutching something in his fist, rocks maybe, his knuckles white. The middle one had her nose in a book, even here, even now, the way some kids protect themselves with stories when everything else is uncertain. The oldest one was standing beside his mother with his arms crossed, not folded against cold, crossed the way you cross them when you are trying to take up space, when you are trying to be bigger than you feel. And the woman, at the center, standing perfectly still. Back straight, face forward, eyes open in the dark. Pauline stopped. The woman's eyes found hers. 2 women, looking at each other in the sweep of the headlights. One had a house with 2 empty bedrooms and a husband who had turned this family away that morning. One had 3 children and nowhere in the province they could go. Something cracked open in Pauline's chest. Not broke, cracked open, the way a window cracks when something outside gets loud enough. She stepped closer. "Come with me," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "All of you. Right now." Noreen's stared at her. The kind of stare that has learned not to trust kindness quickly. You develop it, that stare, when you've been offered sympathy and given a closed door often enough that you've stopped being able to tell the difference from a distance. "I don't know you," Noreen said. "I know you don't," Pauline said, "but it's 4 degrees and it's getting colder, and my car's warm." 7 words. My car's warm. The simplest thing anyone had said to Noreen in 6 weeks. And somehow the hardest to receive because simple kindness after a long drought can feel almost like pain. Noreen looked at Cody. His lips were starting to go pale. She looked at Lily, who had finally closed her book. She looked at Marcus, who was watching her the way he always watched her, waiting for the signal, ready to do whatever came next. She made her decision the way she made all her decisions, not for herself. 20 minutes later, Pauline pulled into the driveway on the county road. Raymond's truck was in the garage. She had not called ahead. She unlocked the front door and held it open. The warm air came out to meet them. Real warmth. The kind that gets into your coat before you've taken it off. Cody walked in first because he had stopped hesitating about things years ago, and he touched the door frame with one hand, both hands, like he was making sure it was solid. "Is this a house?" he said. His voice was small and wondering. "It is," Pauline said. "Is it a real house?" he said. Noreen's jaw tightened. "Yes, baby," she said, "just for tonight." Marcus came in next and stood 2 feet inside the entrance, his back against the wall, taking inventory, the exits, the staircase, the hallway. His eyes moved the way they always moved in new spaces, measuring, cataloging, calculating. He was 13 years old, and he had not relaxed fully in a room in 3 months. Lily went to the couch and sat down carefully at the very edge, like she understood the couch wasn't hers and intended to take up only what she was offered. Pauline went to the kitchen. She heated soup, the real kind, not the powdered kind, from a pot she'd made on Sunday and forgotten to freeze. She sliced bread. She found a piece of chocolate in the back of the cupboard and broke it into small pieces and put it on a plate. She did these things methodically, without theatrics, the way a woman does things when she's spent 20 years walking into other people's crises, and she knows the most important thing you can do in the first 10 minutes is make the temperature and the hunger manageable. The children ate, the specific silence of people eating when they are genuinely hungry. Spoons against bowls, the small sound of bread being torn. Cody ate with both hands and didn't apologize for it. Noreen sat across from them. She didn't eat, she watched them eat. That was what she had been doing for months, watching them eat, sleep, breathe, making sure they were still all there, still all whole, still all hers. Pauline set a bowl in front of her. Noreen shook her head. They needed it more. Pauline sat down across from her. She did not look at Noreen with pity. She looked at her the way she had looked at people for 2 decades of this work. With recognition. With the quiet attention of someone who knows the terrain. "When did you last eat something real?" Pauline asked. Noreen paused. "They had something at the gas station. Around noon." "That's not what I asked." The kitchen was very quiet. Noreen didn't answer. The answer was in the sharpness at her wrists and the hollow of her cheeks and the way her shoulders were curved slightly inward, like a door that had been leaning into the wind, so long it had stopped remembering which way was straight. Pauline pushed the bowl across the table. "Eat," she said. "Just eat." And Noreen picked up a spoon. Raymond Ouellette came downstairs at 7 the next morning. He was expecting silence. He was expecting the house the way it always was now, clean and still and faintly echoing. Instead, he heard something. Children's voices. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, stood in the hallway. Then he walked into the kitchen. 3 children sat at his table. The small one was in Pauline's lap eating toast with both hands. A girl with a book open beside her cereal bowl, reading and eating at the same time with the efficiency of long practice. And a boy, maybe 13, standing at the counter with a dish towel in his hand, drying a mug that was already dry, doing it again, not because it needed it, because he needed something to do with his hands while he kept watch over the room. And then Raymond's eyes found the woman near the window. She was standing with a mug of coffee, looking out at the yard. She turned when she heard him. The woman he had turned away, in his own kitchen, at his table, with her children. His stomach dropped. "Pauline," he said. His voice was flat, controlled. "What is this?" Pauline didn't move from the table. She looked up at him. Her face was composed, but underneath it, something Raymond recognized from 23 years of reading her. Certainty. "This is Noreen," she said. "And these are her children. They spent last night here." Raymond set his mug on the counter. He looked at Noreen. Noreen looked back. Neither of them looked away. "Can I talk to you?" he said to Pauline. They went to the back hallway. He pulled the door. "You brought them here," he said. Low, careful. The voice of a man trying to hold the shape of something that wants to break. You brought strangers into the house, 3 children, without calling me. Pauline, do you understand? I found them on the side of the highway, she said, at night. In November, the youngest one's lips were going white. The 13-year-old was standing in the dark trying to make himself look bigger. That's not what? Her voice didn't go up, it went down. Quieter was always worse with Pauline. He had learned that in year 2 of their marriage, and he had never forgotten it. That's not our problem, Raymond. You sent them away yesterday morning. You looked at that woman and her 3 children on your porch and you said there was too much liability. So they went to Blackville. Their car died on the highway. They sat on a guardrail in the dark in 4 degrees because every door in this area had already been closed. You closed the last one. So yes, it is our problem. You made it ours. Raymond was quiet. He wasn't a cruel man. He had never understood himself as cruel. He was practical. He was careful. His father had been a landlord before him, and his father had told him the same thing, in different words, across different kitchens, for 30 years. Don't let sentiment become policy. Help people once and they'll expect it always. You can't save everyone, so don't try to save anyone. Raymond had carried that instruction like it was wisdom. It had kept his properties in good shape and his accounts balanced and his risk contained. He had told himself it was pragmatism. But standing in his back hallway while Pauline looked at him with that level, exhausted clarity, Raymond felt something he hadn't expected. He felt like his father, and he wasn't sure, standing there, if that was the thing he'd wanted to be. A week, he said finally, just until she gets something sorted. That's it. Pauline nodded. She already knew that a week was a door left open, and open was enough. Raymond walked back into the kitchen. The boy, the oldest one, had finished with the mug and was now standing near the window. He turned when Raymond came in, looked at him the way Pauline sometimes looked at him, direct and measuring, not confrontational, just honest. You need anything done around the place? The boy asked. I can chop wood. I can rake, whatever you need. Raymond stared at him. He was 13 years old. He had spent the night on Raymond's couch in his jacket because he'd refused to take it off in case they needed to leave quickly, and he was standing in Raymond's kitchen at 7 in the morning asking to work for his family's right to be there. Raymond didn't answer right away. I've got some logs that need splitting, he said finally. After breakfast. Yes, sir, Marcus said. He went back to the table. He sat down beside Cody and straightened his brother's collar and pushed his juiced glass closer to the center of the table where it was less likely to tip. Raymond watched him, said nothing, poured his coffee, went to the garage. He sat in his truck for 16 minutes with the engine off. His father's voice was in the cab with him. Clear as weather, don't get involved. But there was another voice underneath it. Older. His mother's. She had died when Raymond was 15. She had run a table at the church in Boys Town for 12 years, every Friday, whatever they had. She had never turned anyone away from it. Not once. She had said it was because she'd been hungry once, and once was enough to remember. Raymond had not thought about that table in years. He sat in the truck until the voice that was his mother's got louder than the one that was his father's. Then he got out and went back inside. The first morning, Raymond came downstairs, and the kitchen was clean. Not just cleared, scrubbed. The stovetop wiped, the floor swept, the compost bin emptied, and the bag replaced. It was 6:15 and Noreen was already dressed, folding the blankets from the couch with careful, straight edges, the kind of edges you make when you know the space isn't yours and you want to leave it better than you found it. She saw him, nodded. Good morning, Mr. Ullett. He nodded back, poured his coffee, said nothing. The second morning, same. The third, same. He noticed. That was the beginning. On the fourth day, Lily left something on the kitchen table. Not on purpose, or maybe on purpose, it was hard to tell with Lily. It was a page torn from her notebook. She'd drawn something on it. A map, or what looked like a map, but when Raymond picked it up, he saw it wasn't a map, it was a floor plan. A floor plan of the house, drawn carefully in pencil, with each room labeled in a kid's handwriting. Kitchen. Living room. the room with the boots, the room with Pauline's plants, and one room at the end of the hall that Lily had labeled with complete seriousness. Room where the coats are and also sadness. Raymond looked at that label for a long time. The room at the end of the hall was the one they'd stopped using 6 years ago, when their daughter had moved to Halifax and they'd moved her things to storage, and closed the door and not really opened it since. Not because of anything dramatic, just because empty rooms accumulate weight over time, and sometimes it's easier not to go in. He set the paper back on the table. He didn't say anything to Lily about it. But that evening he went and opened the door. On the 5th day, Cody found Raymond in the driveway checking the oil on the truck. Cody watched him for a while from a few feet back, the way small children watch things they find interesting, without pretense, without self-consciousness. Then he came forward and held out his hand. In his palm were 2 smooth rocks. Both of them gray, speckled, river-worn. "This one's for you," he said, holding out the rounder of the 2. "It's a good one. I checked." Raymond took the rock. He looked at it for a moment. A piece of the Miramichi riverbed, worn smooth over time by cold water, by patience, by the kind of persistence that doesn't know it's persisting. "Thank you," he said. The words came out rough. He hadn't had much practice with them lately. "You can keep it," Cody said, and walked back inside. Raymond stood in the driveway with the rock in his hand. He stood there for longer than he needed to. That evening, Pauline found him in the kitchen after supper, turning the rock over in his fingers at the table. She didn't say anything about it. She poured herself a tea and sat down across from him. "I haven't told you the whole thing," she said, "about why I stopped." Raymond looked up. Pauline held her mug with both hands. She looked into it the way you look at something you've been carrying without knowing how to set it down. "There was a family," she said. "At the end. A mother, 2 kids. They were in transitional housing and the file got flagged for closure before she'd had enough time to get stable. I put in the extension. Twice. The 3rd time they said no. There was a backlog and the criteria had changed, and administratively it made sense. All of it made sense on paper." She paused. "She ended up in a shelter. The kids went to her sister's. By the time I found out where they were, it was 6 weeks later and the damage was already done, the way it always is. The kind you don't see at first, but that shows up in children's faces 6 months after." Raymond was quiet. "I left because I couldn't do it anymore," Pauline said. "I couldn't keep making sense on paper of things that made no sense in front of me." She looked up at him. "I saw Noreen on that shoulder and I thought, here it is again. The thing I walked away from a job to stop doing. And I thought, not this time, not this one." The kitchen was quiet for a while. "I didn't know that," Raymond said. "I know you didn't." She reached across the table and put her hand on his. Not a dramatic gesture. A 23-year gesture. The kind that doesn't need explanation. "You're not your father," she said. "You never were. You just got the same instructions." Raymond looked at the rock in his other hand. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, "The room at the end of the hall, we should clean it out." Pauline didn't answer. She didn't need to. She pressed her hand over his and they sat at the kitchen table, while the radiator clicked and the wind pressed against the windows, and the house made the sounds a house makes when it's full again. He didn't say yes that night. He said, "Let's see." But he said it differently than he'd said things for a long time, like he meant it as a beginning rather than a delay. Pauline knew the difference. She had always known the difference. On the 6th day, Raymond went to the room at the end of the hall and opened it fully. Boxes their daughter had left, old ski gear, a lamp with a broken shade, a rocking chair with a loose back leg that he'd been meaning to fix since 2019. He carried the boxes to the basement. He moved the ski gear to the garage. He took the rocking chair to the workshop and fixed the leg properly, with dowels and wood glue and clamps, the way it should have been done years ago. He didn't tell anyone he was doing it. On the 7th morning, Raymond came downstairs and the kitchen was clean and Noreen was dressed and had already started a pot of coffee, and he looked at her and said, "There's no rush on finding something. Take the time you need." Noreen looked at him for a moment, checked his face for the catch. for the condition attached to the offer. She didn't find one. "Thank you, Mr. Ouellet," she said. He nodded, poured his coffee. This time he didn't sit in the truck. He drove straight to the hardware store. He came back with a tin of paint, a warm amber color the woman at the counter had called morning wheat. He'd described the room. South-facing, gets good light by 10 o'clock, going to be used by a 10-year-old girl who reads a lot. The woman had smiled. "She'll want something warm," she said, "something that makes it feel like the light's always on." He painted that afternoon. Lily stood in the doorway and watched him work. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Is that for me?" Raymond looked at her over his shoulder. "It is if you want it." Lily thought about this with the seriousness she brought to most things. "I'd like a shelf," she said, "for books." "If that's okay, I'll build you one," he said. He did. That weekend, from a plank of pine he'd had in the workshop for 3 years, he built a shelf with 5 slots and a small lip at the front so books wouldn't slide off. Marcus helped him sand it. They worked in the garage for 2 hours without talking very much, which was fine. Some work gets done better quiet. Marcus sanded carefully. The way you sand when someone has told you someone small is going to use this, and small people deserve the same care as any other. Meanwhile, Noreen had registered for a practical nursing certification through the New Brunswick Community College. 2 evenings a week, clinical hours on alternating Saturdays. She'd researched it on Raymond's laptop with his permission, sitting at the kitchen table after the kids were in bed. She'd found the funding. She'd found the childcare subsidy. She'd filled out the forms herself, alone, at 11 p.m., with the particular focused energy of someone who has learned not to wait for help. She told Pauline about it over coffee on a Tuesday morning, almost like she was apologizing for it. "I just wanted to know the path," she said. "I needed to see there was one." Pauline looked at her for a moment. "There's always been one," she said. "You just needed the table to sit at." Noreen started the program in January. She left Tuesday evenings at 5:30. By 5:15, the kids were fed, homework checked, Cody's rocks accounted for. Pauline was there by 5:20. It had become, without anyone deciding it, a system. 2 women running a household the way 2 people run any shared thing well, by knowing which part belongs to whom and trusting the other to hold theirs. Marcus started at his new school the 2nd week of December. Noreen walked him to the bus stop. His jacket was clean. His shoes were the ones Raymond had ordered online without telling anyone, left outside Marcus's door in the box with a note that said, "For school, from the house." The first day, his teacher asked where he was from. Marcus looked at his desk, then up. "Blackville way," he said, "but I live here now." He had not said, "I live here now" in 4 months. He said it like he believed it. That was enough. On a Thursday evening in February, Raymond came home late from a repair job across town. The house was quiet. Pauline was asleep on the couch. She fell asleep there sometimes, reading, and Raymond usually covered her with the throw blanket from the armchair and turned off the lamp, and that was the whole thing. No drama, 23 years of the same consideration. But tonight she wasn't alone. Cody was tucked in beside her, his head against her arm. 7 smooth rocks arranged on the cushion beside him, in a careful row, like a small exhibition. His breathing was the slow, even breathing of a child who has decided, in his body, that the place he is sleeping is safe. Pauline's hand was on his back, not deliberate. She was asleep. The hand had moved there on its own, the way bodies remember things the mind has decided not to think about. Raymond stood in the doorway. He had not stood in a doorway and watched something small sleeping for a very long time. He had arranged his life so that he didn't have to. Full rental properties, busy weeks, a routine that moved fast enough that certain kinds of quiet couldn't catch up to him. He looked at his wife's hand on the boy's back. He looked at the 7 rocks in their careful row. He turned away, walked down the hall, sat at the kitchen table. He sat there for a while. He didn't cry the way people cry in stories about crying. He cried the way people actually cry, alone in a kitchen at midnight, the specific sound of someone trying to keep it quiet because there are sleeping children in the house. His shoulders moved. His face was in his hands, His breath came in pieces. He wasn't sure what he was crying for. All of it, maybe. The missed decade of doing this wrong. The room at the end of the hall full of boxes while a 10-year-old slept in the living room. The look on Noreen's face on his porch when she'd said they were good kids, they were quiet, they weren't going to be a problem, and he'd looked at the porch railing and said, "You understand," as if she should understand. As if she should understand why the weight of her was inconvenient. His mother's table in Boys Town. Whatever she had. Every Friday, Raymond sat at the kitchen table until the kitchen clock showed 1:30. Then he washed his face, dried it on the dish towel, and walked back down the hall. He stood outside the room Lily was using, the one with the morning wheat walls and the pine shelf with the small lip so books wouldn't slide. He could hear her breathing in there, even and slow. He stood outside Marcus's door, quiet. Then he went to the room that used to be full of boxes and ski gear, and a rocking chair with a bad leg, the room that Lily's map had labeled with complete accuracy. He looked at it for a moment. The walls he hadn't painted yet, the window with the good afternoon light. Then he went to bed. In the morning he called his insurance broker. He asked about adding family coverage to his rental policies. He asked what the real risk actually was, the actuarial risk, the number, not the fear. The broker walked him through it. The number was smaller than Raymond had spent years imagining. He called his accountant next. He had 3 units coming available in the spring. He asked about what adjustments to deposit requirements were feasible for single-income applicants. His accountant said it was Raymond's portfolio, and Raymond could run it however he wanted. Raymond said that was what he needed to hear. He didn't make a speech about it. He didn't write anything down. He just started doing things differently, quietly, the way practical people make lasting changes, not with announcements but with decisions that hold. By April he had rented 2 of the 3 units to families on his own terms. A grandmother raising her grandson after her son's injury. A woman with a toddler who'd been on a wait list for subsidized housing since the previous spring. He knew their names. He fixed their taps himself. He showed up not to collect, but to check. He never told them about Noreen, about the guardrail, about the 7 rocks on his couch cushion. Pauline told them, quietly, when it was relevant. This is a place where families belong. That's what you need to know. Noreen and the kids moved into the unit on Ledge Road in May, when her college placement came through and the numbers finally worked. Raymond had offered it at a rate he called fair, and she called too low, and he called the conversation finished. They moved on a Saturday. Pauline brought boxes. Raymond brought his truck. Marcus and Raymond carried furniture from the storage unit where Noreen had been paying $40 a month to keep what remained of the life before. They worked without much talking. That was fine. They were used to each other by then. At the end of the day, Lily arranged her books on the shelf Raymond had built and moved with them. He'd brought it in the truck, wrapped in an old moving blanket. She hadn't asked him to. He'd just taken it apart the night before, wrapped it carefully, and brought it. He said nothing about it, and she said nothing about it, and the books went onto the shelf, and that was that. Cody ran room to room. He opened every door and closed it and opened it again. He did this for 20 minutes. The concept of doors that opened and stayed open and could be opened again was still new enough to be interesting. Marcus went to the room he'd share with Cody. He pressed both palms flat against the wall, held them there, felt the plaster, the solidity beneath it. He stood like that for a moment. Then he turned to Noreen. "Is this ours?" he asked. "Like ours and nobody can say we have to go?" Noreen's lips pressed together. She nodded. She couldn't speak. Her hands were shaking, and if she moved them, something would come apart that had been holding together for a long time, and she needed it to hold a little longer. Marcus turned back to the wall. He pressed one hand flat against it again. Then he exhaled, slow and long. "Okay," he said. "Okay." He went to the closet, started unpacking, slowly, like someone making sure it lasts. Raymond changed his application process that spring. No form, a conversation. "Tell me your situation. What do you need? What can you work with? Let's see what seeks sense." Pauline had written a short paragraph he used to describe the properties now. 3 sentences, nothing fancy, it said. Families welcome, it meant it. He still drove past that stretch of highway sometimes. The shoulder outside Blackville, the guardrail near the Irving. He drove past it on his way to the hardware store, on his way back from a repair call. He drove past it and he didn't stop, but he always looked. He looked the way you look at a place where something shifted in you. Not broke. Shifted. The way a thing shifts when enough weight is applied in the right direction at the right moment. His father had built walls around his properties and called it wisdom. Raymond had inherited those walls and built them higher and called it caution. It had taken a woman standing straight on a guardrail in the November dark, and a boy who sanded shelves without being asked, and a 6-year-old handing over his best rock with the gravity of a man offering everything he had to show Raymond what those walls had actually been keeping out. Not risk, not liability, not wear and tear. The thing they'd kept out was the same thing the walls had always been built to protect against, and the same thing. It turned out that was the only real cure for the keeping.